Hi, and you are very welcome to this short presentation on a very important question that I'm asked quite often. And the question is witchcraft real? And by witchcraft, I think we mean the belief that there could be an evil magic where one person casts a spell and does harm on the other. Some people call it juju, some people call it witchcraft. But the question remains is, can witchcraft really damage your health and happiness? And this may surprise you, but as a Western doctor, yes, I truly believe in witchcraft. And I'll go on to explain a little bit about why this is so. You see, witchcraft is something that we use every single day in medicine. Let me tell you a story that will help you to understand what I mean. This story comes from 1957 and talks about two people, Mr. Wright and Dr. West. And Mr. Wright had developed a very advanced form of cancer and lymphoma, and there was really no hope for him. But Mr. Wright really believed that if he could get this new chemotherapy called crebiozin, that he could get better. Now, his doctor felt that his disease was so far advanced that this was unlikely, but he still wanted to help his patient, and so got the crebiozin. And within 10 days, this man's cancer and lymphoma had just melted away, which really was almost unbelievable. So Mr. Wright went about living his life very happily for some time, until he read in the newspapers that there were reports coming out the crebiozin really didn't work at all. So now he didn't believe in crebiozin, and sure enough, his cancer came back. Now his doctor was a very forward-thinking man, and he realized that the likely reason that the crebiozin had worked in the first place was Mr. Wright's belief. And so he called Mr. Wright and said that he had great news. A discovery had been made that the crebiozin batch actually had been damaged, and they now had some ultra-pure crebiozin, and he was going to give Mr. Wright the new crebiozin. Now this was an absolute and utter lie, but it was well-intentioned. And Dr. West prepared some sterile water, injected Mr. Wright, told him it was crebiozin, and guess what? Yet again, the cancer disappeared. Again, sometime later, the medical literature reported yet again that crebiozin didn't work, and sure enough, Mr. Wright relapsed and passed away. But what we see here is the power of belief, because when Mr. Wright believed in the crebiozin, he got better. And when he stopped believing, he got worse. There is no reason that sterile water that we can think of would actually eliminate a cancer and lymphoma apart from the power of belief. And that essentially is what witchcraft is. You see, it's all a question of language, because you might call it witchcraft or juju, but in medicine we call it placebo. And placebo is the fact that when we as doctors say to patients, this is really, really powerful, and we have a belief in a substance or a treatment, that belief alone can cause patients to get better 30% of the time. And that's why I say we use witchcraft every day, because witchcraft, okay, in general refers to a belief that you're harming a patient, but go a little bit deeper. Witchcraft is a belief that you can cause someone to believe, true or false, for good or for bad, that you're going to have a certain effect on them. And that's what we're doing with the placebo effect in medicine. Now, equally in medicine, we have something that's even closer to witchcraft, and that's called the nocebo effect. And the nocebo effect is the belief that something will harm someone. So if we prescribe a medicine, we usually are obliged to tell people, this medicine can have the following side effects. Even if we give people sugar pills and we tell them that these medicines can have certain side effects, people can experience those very side effects with just sugar pills, and that's known as nocebo. And I think that nocebo and witchcraft are essentially the same thing. A wonderful doctor called Dr. Andrew Weil talks about medical hexing, which is rather similar. And he says in medicine, if you tell someone, you've got cancer and you've got 6 months to live, that the power of that belief that the patient now takes on causes them to usually die within 6 months. And he warns doctors to be really, really careful, that it's important to give people information, sure, but we need to remind people that these are just averages, that they may live longer, and it's just average information. But remember, when we tell people this is what will happen, it's a placebo or a nocebo effect, and the power of belief is incredibly, incredibly important. So the question is, if you believe that you have been hexed, or that someone has done witchcraft to you, do I think it could negatively affect your health? Yes, I think that's possible, if you also believe in the power of witchcraft. So the question is, if you find yourself in this position, what are you going to do? And yes, I am well aware that you're not going to find many doctors who are going to sit down and talk to you about witchcraft. So let's look at what you probably need to do. I think there's probably very little point in appealing to what's known as the rational mind. So the brain is a very complex structure, and part of the brain is rational linear thinking. So these are where, you do your shopping lists and your to-do lists, but it only works in a certain way. And over the years, I have found that telling people that witchcraft does not exist, which is something that would appeal to the logical mind, really just isn't that helpful. Equally, telling them that it's just a placebo effect or a nocebo effect, and they need to get over it, equally, that doesn't work in my experience. But what does work in my experience is the following. You see, the brain is complex, as I've mentioned, and as well as a conscious mind, you have a subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind absorbs lots and lots of information. It tends to absorb this information, particularly when you're very, very young. It also absorbs it from the culture in which you live. And so if culturally you believe that in, say, witchcraft, if the culture you come from believes in witchcraft, then that belief is deep in your subconscious. And it's very difficult to use your rational, logical mind to overcome this. And so we need to find other ways. And so I think it's probably really important to find ways to eliminate these negative beliefs from the subconscious. And what we're essentially doing here is transmuting the energy of a negative belief, which is in this case a nocebo type belief, into at least a neutral belief. And there are a number of ways of doing this. And many of the ways of doing it really depend on the culture you come from and what your belief system is. But very often it's helpful to use ritual to eliminate this belief. And so if you come from a culture which believes strongly in the power of certain herbs or candles or dancing or drumming, then I think that's exactly what you should do. You need to do anything you need to do so that you can overcome this subconscious belief that is driving or has the potential to drive a nocebo effect. So what I suggest you do is you design a beautiful ritual for yourself. Sit down and think about, what do I need to do? It doesn't have to be elaborate, it doesn't have to be long, you don't have to tell everyone that you're doing it, but come up with some little ritual. It could be as simple as writing a letter. Dear subconscious, I realize that you have this belief and you believe in witchcraft. I'm now asking you to release that belief because it no longer serves us, and let's transmute that energy into the light. And then you could potentially burn that letter to give it a sort of a ritualistic feeling. Or perhaps it's about lighting a candle and meditating. Or perhaps, as I say, it's about dancing and drumming. But what works really well in my experience is to find a dedicated time and space, design the ritual with great care, because the more care and the more attention you put into the ritual, the easier it's going to be for your subconscious to eliminate that belief. It's a powerful belief in your subconscious, and you need to ritualistically eliminate it. You also must believe at the end of it that it's done, completely forgotten about. And so I wish you every success. I hope this has served you. And it's all about taking a belief, and that belief can be just as easily used for good. So you can take the energy of what you perceive to be witchcraft and you can transmute it into energy that serves your health and happiness. And I wish you every health and happiness.